right, so the QX will act as the DHCP server within that VLAN, and again, that helps keep your phone traffic separated from your data traffic. Okay, some of the we're looking at remote phones. Some of the problems that you're faced with the remote phones. One of those is because the phone is behind a firewall. Obviously, that's a challenge. The phone is going to use a SIP port, and it's going to have a range of voice ports. And those ports are going to be closed by default, so you might need to manually go into that firewall, and that might be an option. If you only have a few phones, you can manually go in and port forward those phones directly to the phone. Another problem that you might see on some of the is the fact that the phone itself is using a private IP address. So sometimes it might try to use that private IP address when communicating with the PBX. Okay, so that's something that we look at, and we recognize that, and with the symmetric RTP option, we will communicate with its public IP, and with the symmetric RTP option, the setting, we're going to communicate and send the audio back to the same port from where the audio had originated from on the where it came from the phone. As it passes through the firewall, that's another problem. The firewall often will change the port number. Okay, so if the phone originates and sends SIP messages out from port 5060 as it crosses that firewall, that port number might not be 5060 anymore. When it gets exposed to the outside world, it might be something else. Okay, and the same with the voice ports, so it's not consistent. So that becomes a challenge as well. Well, symmetric RTP will compensate for that, and we're going to send back the audio to the same port from where we received the audio from, coming from that site. Okay, so that's another problem. Okay, so some of these can be mitigated. It depends on the firewall and how strict it is. I know SonicWall is very difficult sometimes, maybe to configure some of those ports and even do port forwarding. All right, we want to look at the methods, okay, of configuring a remote phone. I'm going to log into a. This is for those of you who aren't this familiar with the PBX. So this is. I was initially logged in. This is a QX200. Okay, locally, it's local with me here on my network, and then I've got an ECQX. So this is our cloud-based PBX. You notice the interface looks identical to our premise-based PBX. So if you learn one, you're familiar with both. All right, we're going to look at, I've got some extensions that we're going to be configuring today. We're going to go to the extension setup, and we'll look at the extensions. I'm going to be configuring extension 1050, 1051, 1052. We're going to be configuring a SNOME 710, a Fanville X4. The first one we'll do will be a manual configuration. It'll be on IP line 10. And then we're going to do a Fanville X4 using the provisioning server, and also the Fanville's redirect server. And then we're going to look at doing a Yealink on IP line 52 using the OpenVPN settings. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to look at, and yes, this is it's a QX, ACQX, and we have, I can't even tell you how many extensions we have configured on this system. Okay, so many extensions. All right, so let's go to interfaces, and I'm going to look at the IP line settings, and we're looking at IP line 50. So first method, we're going to look at the manual method. So I'm going to go to IP line number 50, and you get to you've got a device in your hand, and you look at your list of supported phones, and you don't, that phone or model, it might not be on that list, or maybe it's maybe it's one of the newer phones that just came out from the phone manufacturer and we haven't tested it yet. So at the very bottom of the list, you can choose the model type of other, and you lose the opportunity of being able to enter the MAC address. Okay, there is a username, there's a password. You can enable the symmetric RTP option, and let's go ahead and just save those settings initially. Okay, and I do need to know what that password is, so I'm going to go back and generate a password. Okay, and so you click on generate password, and you've got the, if I'm careful, I can highlight it, right click on it, and I can copy that password. Okay, and now I'm going to choose it by clicking on it. I'll save it, I'll put it into the password settings. Now I know what that username is, I know what that password is. All right, so at this point, I can go to always configure the QX first. All right, if you don't, there's a chance that you're going to get your IP blocked. As we mentioned last week with the SIP IDS, it will block external registrations that it doesn't recognize. All right, so we're going to look at configuring a SNOME, the 710. So we got the account. First of all, I got the password. I'm going to copy that password right into the password settings. Okay, then we've got the username. This is local ext 1050. I'm going to copy that into the account name. It's also going to be the same for the authentication username. And we'll just put a name on this, Andy extension 1050, I believe it was. And then we need to enter the registrar, which is the location of the PBX. Okay, I'm going to copy this over from my notes that I have here and enter that into here. Okay, this is Epygi production QX dot epygicloud.com, and at the end I put colon, and we're using a different SIP port. We're using 5065. All right, so we're going to apply those settings, save those settings, and at this point the phone should be going off and trying to register to the PBX. Okay, and it did, and we get a 200 OK here. If I look at the identity, it doesn't tell me on the identity, but if I look at the system information, and one of the nice things about the SNOME phones is you can look at the SIP trace, and you can see where it went off and performed a registration to the PBX. The PBX replied with a 401 unauthorized, and so the phone resends the register message, and this time it has the valid username and password, encrypted password in it, and because it matched with what we have, you get a 200 OK message from the PBX. So if we look at the PBX, we go back to status and system status, and we look at the IP lines registration, we can see that the Here it is down here. This line, local extension 1050. It is registered, and it needs to re-register in the next hour. Okay, at that point, let's see, I do have this phone over here. So this phone is working. Because I did a factory default on it, it's just asking me for the time zone. I just need to set that real quick. All right. And it shows me registered, and I can dial this dial 0. We can dial this dial 00. And we'll see if we can make a call.
Come to the auto attendant if you know your.
All right. If I dial *74.
This phone is connected to IP line number 50. Extension is 1050.
Okay, so now you can see that it is registered. And excuse me, losing my voice. I've had a cold here lately. Hoping my voice will hold up. So bear with me. So the phone, it did register out to the PBX, out to the QX. Now keep in mind, this phone is on my private network. Okay, and I can actually call it from some other phone. I do have another phone that's already registered as extension 52. So I can call that extension 1050. And you can hear the familiar Snom ringtone. All right, let's end that call. So we've manually registered that phone. All right. The next phone that we're going to be looking at, I've got a Fanville and I've got a Yeelink. They're both sitting there in a factory default state. So let's go back. We're going to look at the next one will be the Fanville phone. And we're going to look at the provisioning. This is going to be IP line 51. So I click on IP line 51. And I need to specify this is a Fanville. It's an X4. And then I need to enter the MAC address, which I do have. Let me just copy and paste that over in the interest of time. Local extension 1051. There is a good strong password here. I don't need to know what it is. Why? Because the system is going to push that username and password out to the phone once it registers. All right, I can use the symmetric RTP option. And let's go ahead and save that. All right, now let me log into the Fanville settings. Using admin. Okay, on the phone there's an auto provision tab. Okay, so you can see this phone is currently it's in a factory default state. Here's your accounts down here at the bottom. They're all inactive. There's nothing there. We're going to go to the auto provision, and down towards the bottom there's a static provisioning server. I click on it, and there's a place where you enter the server. Okay, so this is where I'm going to enter. You could put an IP address or the host name, which is the PBX Epygi production QX .epygicloud.com /IPE config. Okay, and I'll make that a little bit larger so everybody can see that. Okay, so at the end you put the IPE config, and by the way, this is there's a document that talks about doing this. Okay, one of the documents that we pointed out last week that we looked at, and then we put in the configuration, the file name. Okay, and the file name, this is the file name that the server, the PBX, is going to be have. and it's going to contain the MAC address. Just all the characters in the MAC address, no colons, .cfg. The protocol method to use to request the config file, and the update mode. So we're going to update the phone after it's going to update the config file after it does a reboot. And we apply the settings, and then we can go over to tools, and in here in tools there's a reboot phone option. Do you want to reboot the phone? Yes, we do. All right, so we're going to let the phone reboot. It will take it a couple minutes, so we're going to move on to something else. Okay, so when that phone comes up, we're going to look for it. I'll let you know. I've got it sitting here beside me, and we'll just let it continue to reboot. And so what the phone's going to do is it's going directly to the PBX, the ECQX, and it's going to directly request that configuration file from the PBX. Okay, there's another method where you can actually go out and have the phone contact the manufacturer's provisioning server. Okay, and so let's take a look at that here briefly. Okay, as this phone is actually coming up. So the phone's actually going to reboot a couple times. It reboots initially, it goes out, and as it's coming up, it goes out, contacts the QX, requests a configuration file. That file is going to be sent out to the phone if all goes well, and then the phone's going to reboot another a time. In fact, it just came up now, and it's doing a second reboot. So hopefully that's a good sign that it's getting the configuration file from the PBX. All right, so this is the Fanville distributed provisioning service. Okay, we've got an account that we've requested of them. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know all the ins and outs of their provisioning server, but I don't really need to. I just need to know where I need to put my devices and where I need to set my configuration options. Okay, I'm sure there's a lot more that you can do with this, and they've got some documentation on it. Okay, if I go to devices, you'll see that there's no devices listed there. Okay, there's a couple groups. One of them is called Epygi ECQX, and it's in this group that you specify where the PBX, the ECQX server is. Okay, and by the way, the phone just came up, the Fanville. It came up, it rebooted for the second time. If we go to status and we look at extension 1051, you can see that that phone has provisioned. It's come up, so I should be able to call extension 1051. And it is working. Okay, excellent. I love it when things actually work. All right, I did test this out yesterday just to make sure this was going to go as planned, so kind of minimize the risk there a little bit. All right, so the phone is up. Let's just go back to the phone, and we're going to continue with the provisioning server here momentarily. But first thing I want to do is I'm going to be doing a, let's look at the settings. If we look at account, um, let's look at the line settings. You can see that the phone is registered. There's a username, local extension 1051, and here's the display name. This came from the extension Andy Fanville X4. The authentication name is the same. There's the password. Here's the Epygi production .com port 5065. All right, so all that was provided to the phone in the form of a configuration file that was pushed out from the PBX. All right, in a moment we're going to come back and we're going to do a factory default on all these settings and see if we can get it to register through the phone provisioning server. So let's go back to the provisioning server. All right, so we were looking at, I logged into the provisioning server, and I'm looking at the first group called Epygi ECQX, and I did an edit on that group. And down towards the 3/4 of the way down, there's an option here that says phone flash. Basically, this is the server location where the server is located, where the phone needs to go and contact the server. Okay, you can see that it's Epygi production qx.epygicloud.com. Then the method that's going to be used will be TFTP, and it's going to update after reboot. Okay, similar settings that we entered manually into the phone. We're going to the phone's going to get those settings now from the provisioning server. Okay, so we've got our group, and that's really the only field that you have to set is the server address. That's the main thing. But now you need to enter the phone's MAC address, and I do have a file for that as well. So I've already created that. So let's take a look at it. It's excuse me. So you put in this. This is a file from their provisioning server. You can download it, and it has a couple headings at the top. Two fields: the model, phone model, and the MAC address. All right. So I'm going to let's see. I'm going to close that file. Because I want to upload it, and we're going to upload it to the we go to the device table, and over here there's a place, or I could also go to the group, and in the group I can click to view all devices of this group. If I go to the devices table, I can do an add, and when I go to do an add, I can specify the group name. I didn't do this yesterday, so this is you can specify it now, or you can specify the group after you upload the file. And then you choose your file. It's an Excel file. All right, this is what it's called, Mac settings, and I'll upload it. All right, small file. You can see my 3 phones that are now listed, and one of these, I think it's this one here, is the one that we're working on. I'm not sure if it's this one or the third one, but okay. So at this point, what I want to do is I'm going to go back to the phone itself, and we're going to go ahead and do a factory default. So I go to System,